Get yourself together before it's too late. Good evening, everybody. Who the hell cares? Dave will be with us soon. He's late as usual. What can you say? Good to see everybody. Joey, Max, Kim, Anthony, Sandy, Kinky. Whoever else is out there, it's good to see you. Oh my, what a week. All right, I'll turn down the effects there. Let's see if I can get this right or something. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter, does it? Yeah. Well, I hope my audio is fine. If it's working, please tell me. Caveman. Yeah, good looking girl. You know, my parents obviously at the time didn't know whether I was going to be a girl or a boy, so they had a name picked out for me. I believe it was Brenda, and if I was a boy, it would be Brian. My father thought it was going to be a girl, and here I am. Funny story. I was born in Camden, New Jersey, and my father had to run up to where they had all the incubators and that kind of stuff. And I guess my name, or the last name, was near one of them. And he was all excited, you know. He said, "There's my boy." And it was a boy. So the nurse said, "No, Mr. Weinstein, that's an African-American boy over there. Your son's over here." So it was funny. Yeah. Well, how is everybody? How was your week? Yeah, well, mine's about the same as ever. Busy. Got a lot of things I want to talk about tonight. We're going to have Kevin Wheeler coming on around 9:30, 9:45. We'll be talking Ukraine. Perhaps he'll discuss a few of the things going on with his buddies in Ukraine. We know that one lost his life. Or should we say he had his life taken? What else? We're going to see some videos tonight from the conservative media. And that's always a lot of fun, isn't it? Yeah. All right. Weep from Hell. Need a new one. Yeah. Tell me about it, Kim. It doesn't get any easier, does it? All right. This isn't exactly how I wanted this set up. I almost look like Howard Stern here a little bit. Do you get that feel? I should put in an overlay. Yeah, I should do that for iPhone. I don't know. Does that work? Not really. I guess if I edited it, I could make it work. I really don't like. I don't like playing around with this. Well, that kind of looks cool. Should have 3 of me since Dave's not here right now, and he will be here. Pain in the ass that he is, but he will be here. He's late. He said he had some red carpet affair, which could mean a lot of things, but it sounded like it was important. I don't know. All right, just the 3 of us. All right, you decide which one you want to look at, left, center, or straight. I imagine it'll be the center. And my other scenes will go back to me. I've been having fun with this week, so why not? Where should we start? You know what? I am going to talk a little bit about the environment for a second, because I think it's really important that I discuss it, at least for a little bit. You know what I mean? So let's get away from my Snapchat phase here and go to the web. Oh my. I guess I'm not leaving. All right, let's turn down the sound effects. Okay, so we've been hearing about Lake Mead and Lake Powell and all these kind of problems, and apparently there's been so much water loss that they're going to have restrictions in California as far as watering the lawn, which is fine by me. I mean, who really cares about the grass? And if you think about all the shit we put on the grass, and it harms the squirrels and the birds and whatnot. I mean, I'm sure that it decays after a while, but you just don't want that kind of shit. Nothing grows in the summer anyway here. It gets just too damn hot. So they say that something like 70% of the water in California is used to feed lawns. So it's going to kind of really stop. And it looks really bad now because, there's a lot of energy that's created from Lake Mead and Lake Powell. And apparently by January, if it goes down another 32 feet, those turbines aren't going to work. All right, let's see if we can't check. AT-Bone. Lake Havasu. Oh, what the hell happened to him? All right. All right, let's check this out for a little bit. This was from CNN. They've done a good job, and they've been talking about this a lot. Now, of course, I don't think anybody's going to do anything, but I think that the interesting thing here is the states that they mention will be greatly affected. States like Arizona, Nevada, Utah, these states, New Mexico, and these are generally conservative states. So let them deal with it. Don't drink. It's like the vaccine. You don't want to take it? Go meet your maker. Oh, here he comes. All right, Dave. Good to see you. We're jumping in here.
Oh, wait a minute. Whoa. Who are you?
Oh, I forgot all about that, actually. I had this on. I'm playing with Snapchat shit for a little bit. Maybe it's an early you.
What's going on?
What's going on?
No, it's you.
It's me, yeah. It keeps going back and forth. I don't know what's going on here. All right, Dave. We got you in here either way. So,
are we on the air yet?
Yeah, we're on the air. How about you? Do you have any echo?
Yeah, I do. I have horrible.
That's not good.
No, it's got a bit of a,
All right.
but it's your inability to run this show, so that's fine. I'll deal with it.
All right. All right. Okay. Well, I'm going to play. This is just something I want to get out of the way, but I think it's important. It's about Lake Powell and Lake Mead, and the fact that it's running out of water, and this is a long term event, something that's going
Mhm.
to obviously get worse before it's going to get better. But as I said, Dave, when you just before you came on, that oddly enough, many of the states that are going to be affected, like Nevada, New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, generally conservative states, and they need to drink. I mean, water, aside from air, that's, in terms of Maslow's needs, that's like number two. So, and as I said, that, maybe they just have to deal with it, you know. But let's just check it out. When we want to see a few clips here.
Miles of rock also tell the story.
This ring we see on the canyon walls, they call it the bathtub ring. That's where the water is leached out, the iron from the rock.
And that's how high the water was.
That's how high the water was at one point.
You said just in September, the
Right.
water was just 4 feet above this ledge that we're looking at here. And that's just September.
Right.
So the water is dropping quite dramatically, quite quickly.
It has.
As water levels decline, so does power production at the Glen Canyon Dam, which harnesses the force and volume of the Colorado River and Lake Powell to generate power for as many as 5.8 million homes and businesses in 7 states.
All right, Dave, let me go off of loop back here for a second so we won't get any echo. At least we shouldn't. So, Dave, you can see the overlay, can't you, of the states?
Yeah.
All right, so Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Wyoming, Utah, Nebraska, Nevada. Now, as much as that may seem like bad news, it doesn't seem like any type of logic or any type of fair media play or even education seems to work with these people. So maybe thirst, maybe it has to happen. Maybe this is what really, really has to happen. And I'm not saying that I am that vindictive that I don't want people to drink, but I've had these moments. I mentioned it to everybody that, there were times during COVID I said, I wish this disease had been deadlier, because these son of a bitches who don't take it seriously, maybe they needed to get, triple polio till they get it. They have to learn how to get it. Do you see any positives in this in terms of the way I'm thinking?
Well, let me start it this way. First of all, you're breaking up tonight, so I would send out a message. I don't know if it's my end, your end, whatever, but you're actually breaking up more than I am.
Check. Well, last time I had a problem. I think I had the mic set differently, but this should be correct.
No, it's I don't know.
If anybody is hearing me break up, tell me, because I have to make sure that the video is right. So I need help from people.
No, it's not video. It's audio breaking.
No, that's what I'm talking about. The audio.
It's audio, Brian. You said video, but you don't know what you're doing anyway. The problem with your idea, while understandable, is innocent people will suffer. Nature doesn't really determine who's smart and who's dumb. As far as the general populace, it does show who's dumb and smart as far as leadership. So, I would hope that we don't get to that point where we run out of water. Now, I know that's not what you were saying, but that's a possibility too. Because the way America is set up, the rich will be okay, or they'll be the last ones to go, right? So it will be the poor first. It'll be those who agree to any rationing if we have to do anything with any resources. And Brian, as I sit here tonight, I don't know if there's anything that is going to change the Republican, the new Republican, the Trump Republican, the insurrectionists, whatever the hell you want to call them. I don't know if anything's going to change the mindset. So what does that mean? You tell me, or anyone tell me. I don't see a good future for America. Having said that, that's today. As was said in Gone with the Wind, tomorrow that's another day, and that's true. But right now, Brian, I just don't see any hope for any kind of national unity on anything. So, to answer your question, if something isn't done, there will be shortages. But maybe the Republicans will blame it on the invisible aliens that were brought here by Democrats having sex, and off we go. So, Brian, that's not a very good answer to your question.
Well, I know it actually does. I mean, I think,
but it's the best I can give. I mean,
right.
I'm at a point, and says somebody, who cares that Dave's at a point? Well, Dave cares if Dave's at a point where you continue to fight, but you're not really necessarily fighting for victory. You're fighting because it's the right thing to do. And in my way of thinking, I haven't seen anything that the Republicans have offered, could offer, will offer that I want to be involved in. So the fight is directed against them. And again, I'll voice it. I have one voice and I intend to use it. I have one vote and I intend to use it. And after that, I don't know.
All right, Dave. Well, I appreciate that, and I think this is going to relate to pretty much what I'm going to go.
Are you doing something with Rasputin tonight, or
no? There's no Rasputin tonight. It's almost like it's almost like a Howard Stern thing. Actually, I mean,
you're turning into Howard Stern.
No, I'm not. But if there's any one person this kind of thing would look like, it would be Howard Stern, except that the hair's a little bit straighter. And
let me ask you something. Do you think that's a good look you have right now, or a bad look?
I'm always experimenting. You know what I mean? Always experimenting. There are other looks that I can put in here, but
So you're subjecting the people who tune into this show for your willy-nilly experiments?
Right.
Is that what you're
exactly? And that's what they do. They just do that.
That's why
they like my eccentricities.
I guess some people call them eccentricities. I call them kind of open assholes.
You're just lucky that I haven't started my accents here.
You haven't been doing those, have you?
No, I haven't. But I've
good.
Remember, like
I remember
Zoe's Kitchen. You'd like it too. Well, anyway, Dave, I do have some things that are going to relate to what you've been talking about, whether these Republicans aren't giving in and what they're actually doing, and we're gonna kind of stay with this this scene here. This is Hannity, and
I know him.
Yeah, you know who he is. Now, I wanted to show this because they're talking about Twitter, And then, of course, he goes off into a little bit of a tangent. He always has to mention Hunter Biden. So I want people to catch on to this. And then I'm going to show you some other things with Laura Ingraham, and you're going to see where there are edits. You can see certain edits when they talk. So Biden's always coming up, even though they're talking about Twitter. And we're going to talk about Twitter once we see a little bit of this. So I'm going to show a bit of this, and then we're going to discuss it, afterwards, just for a short. Okay, so let's listen to Hannity. And by the way, Kevin Wheeler is going to come on probably in about 20 minutes or so, something like that. At least he's scheduled to. Okay.
Donald Trump was canceled on Twitter, the same people that lied to you, the American people, for years about Trump-Russia collusion that never happened. Wow, you don't say. All of a sudden, wow, banning people on Twitter is a bad thing? Really? Where have you people been? Take a look.
If you own all of Twitter or Facebook or what have you, you don't have to explain yourself. You don't even have to be transparent. You could secretly ban one party's candidate or all of its candidates, all of its nominees, or you could just secretly turn down the reach of their stuff and turn up the reach of something else, and the rest of us might not even find out about it till after the election.
At a time when authoritarians, insurrectionists, and rogue petrostates are weaponizing disinformation online.
Looks like they're at war with MSNBC.
Elon Musk says he is buying Twitter to save free speech online. And what he means by that is he wants to push back on efforts to moderate content on these websites.
So when Elon Musk says, wow, this is about free speech, it seems to me that it's about free speech of straight white men.
Okay, these are the very same people that didn't say a single word when conservatives were banned. They were shadow banned. Their voices were being silenced. They never uttered a single phrase of support for freedom of speech, but they're fearful it might happen to them.
Now that's, here's the point I'm going to try to make, Dave, is that, they first of all, they edited out some of the more important points that MSNBC actually talked about, and the same for CNN. And that is, I think that most of us are worried about the content being misused and the fact that it can't be verified. And that's the problem. Okay, I understand where they're coming from, where, you don't want to ban free speech. We understand that. But as you pointed out, very academically last week, is that this has been an effective tool of just lying and lying and lying, and it's getting through. And when you have misinformation, there's got to be some kind of wall to stop that. Otherwise you're going to have kind of like the Russian thing, which is essentially, that's one of the big reasons they have the ability to go to war and get the support of their own people, because they believe that there are Nazis there. So, big problem, right, Dave?
Well, what Mr. Hannity is talking about and what I see the concern is very different. My problem with Elon Musk owning Twitter, and if the deal goes through and everybody's doing it like it's a done deal, it's not quite that. So there's always last minute glitches. But the idea of it is, that's a lot of power to put in one man's hands. So my objection, and I think also behind what other liberals are saying, is this is scary because one man will essentially control it. Now, I don't know Elon Musk. I've never broken bread with the man, but I have followed what he's done. And there's a lot about, what's good for Elon is good for America behind that. Also, the difference was banning Donald Trump was banning an American voice who is the leading voice of America in the position he was in. the President of the United States should be held to a higher standard. Mr. Trump falls every time to the lowest standard. Mr. Hannity, I would question anything he says, since the new reveals this past week show he was really working with the White House. Nothing we don't know, but even more so. So, I wouldn't believe Sean Hannity if he told me, "Hey, your name's Dave Price." I'd go check my birth certificate.
But isn't this what is really propelling Republicans to success all across the country? I mean, or is the tail wagging the dog, and it's the constituents forcing this kind of thinking and affecting Fox?
When's the last time, Brian, I'm again asking you to be an everyman, that you watched at least 2 shows or portions of 2 shows on MSNBC?
I would say I know Thursday night for sure.
Okay, that's a good answer.
Right.
Now, if somebody was to land on this planet not knowing what was going on, they might say that MSNBC is no different than Fox because it seems like they're telling 2 completely different narratives. Would you agree with that?
Mm-hmm.
There is a difference. What MSNBC says is 90%, and it might even be more, but at least 90% verifiable and truthful. Probably the opposite percentage, maybe 10% of what Fox says is truthful.
Oh, Dave, sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
You need to get a whole new computer system and audio system. Kim says your audio sucks.
No.
So lay off the money. That's it.
Now listen. And I'll tell you why it doesn't. Okay, is it any better now?
I don't know.
And I just switched mics. So it's on your end, Brian.
No.
I'd love to tell you, when I work with everybody else, it's fine. So it's you. It's
we're gonna if Kevin comes on the night, we're going to know for sure, because if his works, it shouldn't work. His should not work if yours doesn't work. If your theory is correct,
you're all wrong. I don't know what else to do on my end.
Scream. No, don't scream.
All I can tell you is it works with everyone else.
Yeah, but that might be the B League, you know what I mean? That's
no, or you could be well, I've seen what you don't know. And I don't know what to correct, so we'll just ride. I guess we'll just
let it go, and we'll definitely get Kevin in. Now, listen, I do have some more that I want to show you in this same line of thinking here. So we're going to go back to this time. We're going to see one of your favorites, as you would say to me, Laura Ingraham. I may have to go back. They talk about teachers in this one, so you're going to love this.
Oh, I love that.
All right. Let me get this off. And we'll come back to you, Dave. I'm putting on loop back, so there's going to be audio, echo if you talk. So.
Birth to my children. I carried them in my womb.
Yeah, you can take my child. You can talk to my child outside my presence. No. Now, Tina, I want you to listen to Biden's disturbing remarks on who
this is the one that
your kids
you can tell there's an edit where they only take.
We always talk about these children. They're not someone else's children. They're our children. They're all our children.
There was the edit right there.
They're not somebody else's
Another
children.
one.
They're like yours when they're in the classroom.
Now they took that totally out of context. Completely out of context. And let me go. I'm not even going to show any more of that. They did have DeSantis on too, by the way, but no need for discussion about him right now. There's enough. All right, so let me go back to that. All right, so basically what they're trying to frame is that Biden's trying to take your children away from you, and she mentions the teachers union too, by the way. So it's an attack on Biden and the teachers union, which is essentially an attack on liberals. And they have those edits, so you don't really see the entire point Biden's trying to make. We treat them, they're all of our children. That's all he's saying. He's not saying that we're taking these kids away from you. They're our children now, not yours. But see, this is the way he's framing it, or she's framing it, and this is the way people think. Now, you were an educated for many, many years. This crock of shit, is this about the worst you've seen? Or is she right?
Well, of course, she's not right. But is it the worst I've seen? No, it's going to get far, far worse. Look. You've got a Republican Party who is not based in any rational, reasonable ideology. They are kooks. What else can you call them? Now, the problems are, well, there are problems, but the thing is, I think Donald Trump is not of a human right mind. And what I mean by that, he is, and we know this, he's the ultimate narcissist. And of course, we know that a characteristic of a narcissist is that they care about no one and nothing but themselves. And I've never met anyone in person or have from a distance studied anyone or encountered anyone or have read of anyone in literature who is in any way the equal of Donald Trump as a narcissist. But that's not who I'm so concerned with, because Donald Trump is who Donald Trump is. I'm more concerned with the Tucker Carlsons, with the Sean Hannitys, with the Ted Cruz's, with the Josh Hawleys, with the Ron DeSantis's, all of whom at least have diplomas from high school and college and some with law degrees. And what they're doing is just manipulating people who are ignorant or hateful or fearful or angry, and they're just feeding that. Now, there were a couple of encouraging signs this week that when you don't have a basis for any beliefs, which the current Republican Party does not, it really does become simply personality and whim. Your two favorite women in Washington, D.C., that would be Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene, apparently, and you have to say apparently because it's not something they would come out and say, in a kind of a closed door thing with some Republicans, went after each other, and people there thought they might have to be physically separated. Now, most people looking at them would say that generally they might be in agreement. Apparently they aren't. That doesn't surprise me. There's not enough oxygen for Greene and Boebert to suck it out of a room with Gates and Mo Brooks and Madison Cawthorn, and the list goes on. And so the question becomes to me, will the Republican Party self-destruct before it destroys America? They're the options.
Well, it's had a lot of good chances to self-destruct in the last 4 years, and it hasn't.
But I agree. So I'm not saying it will. I'm just saying, what are we going to do other than? And Brian, I mean, I think it's very naive of people to think, and certainly their vote counts, I'm not saying that, but in congressional districts the way they are gerrymandered by both parties. Right now, the Republicans are, doing it more. Democrats have done it in the past. The only real contests in congressional elections, not Senate, because they're statewide, but congressional is within your own party. If it is a Republican district, that's where the fight is. Who gets the Republican nod? And now you do have two very distinct factions. One gets more noise, and that would be the Trumpian faction. But there's a faction beyond the Trumpian faction, which is Donald Trump wasn't right-wing enough. So there's always going to be somebody to the right or somebody with a special issue. Now, you asked about schools, and of course the quote was about schools. It's a very effective weapon. I don't know of anyone right now, given the pandemic and what schools went through and what they're seeing, that really thinks the American school system is doing a good job. Now, I didn't say teachers aren't. I didn't say some schools aren't. Let's look from the liberal side. If the schools are doing their job, how come we have so many conservative kids? And I know, the answer would be parents and church, and that's it. They're more important than school. On the conservatives, they are terrified that reading a book about some kid who has two daddies or two mommies or isn't really sure where he fits into the gender
Right, and
continuum.
I want to right when you,
Sure.
you mention this, I want to show this because that's I don't want to lose you on this one, because this is one that as you've nailed it on the head. This was something I did have queued up, and this is exactly what you're talking about. So let's take a peek at this and have you comment on it after.
Equity and inclusion also include incestuous relationships,
contentious school board meetings,
child-adult sex, and books that promote pedophilia,
and controversial decisions to remove books from the curriculum, political campaign ads.
It was some of the most explicit material you can imagine.
That's my state, by the way, that one.
Virginia?
Subject areas, and even penalize librarians who keep titles on their shelves. Books, especially focused on race and LGBTQ issues, are being challenged, in some cases taken off school and public library shelves. The American Library Association says it received 330 reports of book challenges in the fall of last year, more than double the amount received for all of 2020.
Okay, so you get the idea there. Let me go off back. All right, Dave. You should be making. First of all, you were an English teacher, so you know more than anybody what's going on with this. So, because I know you remember you were upset with Huck Finn, like the issue.
There's probably not a book that's ever been written with the Bible in the lead that doesn't offend someone. So if you're going to start banning books, let's just throw them all out. And oh no, that's stupid. Well, it's just as stupid to throw one book out, because what you're saying, or what a person is saying, is this book offends me. And I would guarantee you that the majority of parents or preachers or government officials have not read the books they're asking to be banned.
Right.
Now, one of my favorites to use, and you mentioned it before, it's Huckleberry Finn.
Right.
If you read that book and walk away with the idea that whites are superior to blacks, Please call me because you need remedial reading. What that book says and what Mark Twain intended it for to say, and Mark Twain is a satirist, and that's a danger because some people are just too stupid or too blind to get satire. And what he was poking fun at, and the purposes of satire is to point out foibles, to recognize how stupid some people's positions are. And in that book, Jim, the slave, is the only human male who demonstrates any type of positive humanity. Okay? And Huck, who is this every person, who at one point has to decide which way to go. He in the most, I guess it would be the climax, I suppose, of the book. He basically says this, and I'm paraphrasing. Well, I guess this is a sin to help Jim escape because it's against the law. But you know what? Then I got to sin. Now, what offends people? The N-word. And I personally find that as offensive. I will not say that word simply because I find it in the Dave Price way of thinking about words to be a very negative word that is, I define obscenity, not the way some people do, is obscene because it demeans people. Now, I'll say fuck all night long, and I'll say it at a high church mass on Christmas Eve. Now, that offends people, but there's a whole history behind that word. And it's not, what is it? Unlawful,
fornication under the consent of the king.
Knowledge. What?
Initially, the story was fornication under the consent of the king.
No, none of that is true. Mm-hmm. Here is why fuck is obscene and fornication is not. Now, guess what? They mean the exact same thing. But here's what happens. Fuck is determined to be common. Fornication is high class. Now, how did that come about? Very simply, those words, like fuck, were spoken and came out of the Germanic, Celtic, Jute, not Jew, Jute side of English. And the Angles were part of that. That's why we call it England. And in 1066, quick history lesson, right? The French take over. They become the royalty. They impose their language, and that came from Latin roots. That's why I don't mean to, anybody can turn this off. I cannot go on television and say, or shouldn't say, I ate out my girlfriend last night. Now, well, most people know what I'm talking about, right? But I can say cunnilingus. Why is that? The same as I said before. There's a scholar, I don't always agree with him, but I do think he thinks about words a lot, Richard McWhorter. And I kind of agree with what he's saying in this sense. The original obscenities, which these people were talking about, obscene and things, was actually directed at religion. Golly gee is actually a phrase that comes out of God and Jesus, right? But you can't say those names. Hell and heck, those kinds of things. So the original obscenity was words that were perceived or were against religion. The next wave of obscenity, much later, comes through, and that's words that talk about sexual functions, normal sexual functions, i.e., I can talk about my penis in mixed country, but if I talk about my dick or my cock, and notice what's happening here, Brian. Short words, right? Short words are Germanic, Anglo, Celtic in relation. Longer words, usually Latin-based or Romance-based. And then McWhorter goes on to say, and this is what I really think we are now. We stop people, saying they're obscene, but now the true obscenity is probably directed against the other, meaning the words we use for anybody who's not like ourselves. In other words, someone of a different gender or gender identity, somebody of a different race. So I subscribe to McWhorter's theory to this. They're the words that I try not to use and find, in my definition of obscene. I know there is an argument where a demeaning word taken back by that group, and Brian, you've taught for years in Bridgeton, I taught there for 20 years, and you hear that word, every 14 seconds?
You'll hear it in the halls for sure. It wouldn't take long.
Yeah, well, I'm talking, no.
Anywhere, in any school, but yes.
Right, but they're basically black students saying it to other, like my and, and I would argue with my students all the time that I understand what the intellectual part was to take back this painful, horrible word and make it yours. But people aren't smart enough to understand that, right? So that's why I don't think any group necessarily has, now let me rephrase that, they have the right to do it, but I don't think it's so wise. Another is, if you call someone queer now, and you are cisgendered, which took me a long time to understand what that was, but now I know it's just a biological woman or a biological man born that way who stays that way, then a lot of the gay community finds that demeaning and painful, and I agree with that. However, I don't know that they should. I'm saying they can't use it. I don't want to be. I don't want my sayings to be misconstrued, but there are other words that are better for saying the same thing. Now let's bring it back to the show and conservatives and liberals. Neither side, obviously, is completely blameless for these things. You talk about, but it's interesting. People we would label as liberals, for the most part, are opposed to book banning. Would you agree to that, Brian?
Well, yeah, sure. They want to ban our books. Whatever they deem. And in fact, if you remember, Southwestern, it could be any of the companies, Southwestern, which was started by a guy named Baker many years ago. He was a business teacher, actually, in college, because he didn't like the textbooks. But, these texts printed in in Texas from the same company are slightly different, especially the science books. The biology books are printed differently in Texas than they are in California and New York.
Correct.
So already you can
That is
see
correct.
they see education as a tool to make people liberal.
It is. Education should be a tool where you move away from your positions and begin to realize that maybe there are other positions worth considering.
Then they'll call you a communist.
Well, I mean, I've been called far worse.
I mean, you and I both know that to be true, Dave. So.
Well, I know that, but look, let's look at it this way. But then I want to get back to this point. There are people who are perceived or believe themselves to be liberal who they don't ban books, but they ban speakers on campuses. And my argument, and I go back and forth with this, and it's very hard, I think, to define before you hear it and see it in context, what is hate speech? So do I think that a person should be able to say, go up to the Capitol and change what's wrong by any means necessary? No, I don't believe that. But President Trump did that. That he should not have done, and he should pay for. But do I believe somebody who comes to a campus, right wing, who hasn't advocated death or killing people or any of that, should not be allowed to appear because of his or her political leanings? No. Now, people have told me, and I don't argue with them over it, that's a very naive point that I hold. But here's my problem, Brian. When you allow any censorship of words divorced from the context in which they're spoken,
right?
Who determines that? So I believe you let all the stuff out there, but yes, schools should be somewhat careful about what they teach. Now, as an English teacher for years, in a school where you really had the majority of students, their parents didn't care at all, right? I mean, the good parents and the bad parents, they kind of trusted teachers to do the right thing. But we did have, from time to time, religious zealots who were opposed to certain things. And I actually taught two of the three from one of those families. So what I very clearly point out, if this book offends you, that's fine. But we, meaning myself as teacher and a student, will find a book with comparable theme and a comparable level of what we're trying to teach, or what the message is, and we'll do that.
How about what Gary says here? Because I think this kind of relates to what's happening in Ukraine, which we'll be talking about soon. But he said, I suddenly feel that it's about survival. So he's absolutely doing, almost like it's evolution happening out there. And probably survival of the fittest. Political warfare could lead to eradicating others. And that is happening.
Every word Gary puts up there is absolutely 100% the truth. Now,
how long does it take before we become the Ukrainians in our own country? January 6th would have made that
the only thing, Brian, and this is not a good answer to it. I think it would take longer than it would some other places. I'm not saying it can't happen. And you've talked about the Russian mindset, which I agree with. It's different. There is an American mindset that's being challenged right now. But I've said it before, and it depends on who controls the military. And so far, in crisis, the Northern Army did not desert and go fight with the traitorous South. The Army did not back Joe McCarthy and his attacks on communism and homosexuality. It did not back Richard Nixon when he went off the deep end.
But it did choose Viktor Orban in Hungary.
Pardon?
It can have Viktor Orban. I mean, I know you're looking at the United States and its history.
I'm not saying it can't happen, but what I'm saying is you look at the past as a way to judge what may happen in the future. So let's look at that. How many revolutions have they had in Russia?
Well, I mean, they've had some unsuccessful ones. 1905,
how many
1917. I mean, actual revolutions, you really consider, and in fact, you could say 3 in a certain sense with 1991, but 2 if you want to.
Well, I think you might even find a few more. You were saying that we're successful. They don't have to be. Russia has a history tempered by its people and also by monarchy and also by communism. Right?
Or as some say, that essentially serfdom has never left. I said this last week. Never left Russia because the people.
Do you really think? I'm sorry.
No, I'm just saying. It's. I mean, it's not a written law, but if you look at, how the average Russian lives, hardly any money, hardly any power, and then there's a ruling elite, and they're brutal. Then essentially, what you have is 160 million serfs, and a few 10,000s of the wealthy, and the military behind them.
And you could make an argument that in one sense, the economic sense, slavery has never really left America except now.
Right, with wage slavery. But that's changing. I was on Laurel Street, Dave, went to my favorite Mexican restaurant in Bridgeton. And the woman who worked there and spoke in broken English to me, Dave, and she said, I'm sorry about your order. It was a little bit late. And I said, no, it's fine. And she said, no, I can't, and she said in broken English, but she said, I can't find anybody to work. And I tried to simply say, well, that's the way the economy is now. And that is that, there are a lot of jobs out there and people are going to be finicky. You can't expect to get somebody for $10 an hour to work for you,
That is correct. Now, that's not the way the Republicans want to put it.
Right.
They say that this free giveaway program that the government does has forced or encouraged or induced people not to work. Now, what the pandemic did with everybody, I think, is this. It gave you or forced you to take a time out and look at your life and what's important, right? And what you're doing. And if you were doing a job that you felt was demeaning and you're not getting ahead, what's the purpose of doing that, right? You see, and it could be any profession. I was reading an article the other day about teachers who left to take lower paying jobs, but allowed them to spend more time with their family. I mean, so basically I think what the pandemic did is force this kind of time out and people to look. And suddenly one of the questions you might ask is, why am I working in an Amazon warehouse so that the person who is at the head of my pyramid can fly off into space in a penis-shaped capsule? So, I think this.
I think it's a wonderful thing that has happened with, there's just so much it's just, there's so many places you can look for a job. We finally have leverage. It's one of these few times, if you live a lifetime, once or twice this happens.
And we're seeing the return of youth now. I'm not an expert in labor, but I mean, a little bit in history. I think it was slavery or serfdom under the royal system kind of got translated into workers, management, and owners into the economic systems of capitalist countries, right? So under that system, I guess the bosses are the kings and the middle management are the dukes and the earls and the archbishops, and then the people are the workers. And then unions came and they were labeled communist and socialist. And basically what that was the owners are saying, shit, I'm going to lose profits.
Remember the international workers of the world and the right wing in the United States used to call them "I won't work," workers.
Right. And they employed all kinds of horrible tactics. For example, Brian, you and I, sometimes we do have this internal, conversation on this show because we come from the same area, familiar, same state. We were 35 miles apart until we were 870 feet or whatever separated us in our neighborhood later. But there's a place down there, you're familiar with it, everybody, and I'm just going to say this. It was called Seabrook Farms. And C.F. Seabrook was an agricultural robber baron. And when people tried to unionize his workers, so put this in perspective with Amazon, different time. Do you know he brought in as enforcers? Brought in members of the Ku Klux Klan who were waiting for violence and waiting for this moment to put those people down. Now, you'll always have people, and it was in the Seabrook, who were very grateful for having a job. They wouldn't want to unionize. I will say to anyone that a union gives you more protection than not being in one. That's just the way unions are. Now, the problem is in America, the unions forgot who they were representing. And they become this pyramid power structure where the Jimmy Hoffas were really not much different than the owners that they were fighting, And so you're kind of back to something that I've thought a lot about and I really don't have an answer for. A lot of what we're seeing in this particular time period, really resistance and rebellion was very dormant in the United States from about 1980 through in the 2000s. And suddenly the first group that really came to the forefront were Occupy, if you look at it. And I loved what they attempted, but they ran into a particular problem because they were determined not to have leaders. And the problem with that is who speaks for the group to the opposition. And so everybody was saying whatever, and that's nice, but you can't have that. But then you run the risk of whether leaders are elected, appointed, divine right of kings, it doesn't matter. They tend to lose sight of who they're working for. Brian, you and I have talked about this for years. When you see in our business, or my former and your still current business, somebody moves out of the classroom into administrative. We used to joke, did they get a lobotomy? They weren't like that before. And in the other career that I had, it was the same thing. When someone stopped being a journalist and became an editor, you'd say, man, what happened to them? So we're back to what you were asking before about education. Education should be the great equalizer. You cannot become rich overnight through your own control. You can become rich if you rob a bank or do something like that. But I'm talking about without some kind of penalty. But with education, and it doesn't have to be necessarily school, if you have the ability to read and understand and think and then talk to other people, that can make you equal. So it leads me to think.
It's interesting you say that, Dave. I'm going to interrupt you if
you
don't mind, because one of my favorites is Paul Krugman. And you remember Vic Gilson used to always say that the college student was going to make twice as much as the high school graduate.
Right.
And there was a certain truth to it, but it really wasn't completely true. And Krugman used to always point out that, and this isn't what he's pointing out in this article that I'm showing you here. This is from the Times today. But he was pointing out that if you look at college graduates, it's kind of split into two. You have your professionals, your attorneys and super successful people, and they're making, these quadruple six-figure salaries. And then you have the others, like people like yourself and myself, who probably made less than many plumbers. And that's not to put plumbers down at all. But it overestimated the value of a college education. And what he's saying is in this article is that, the college education just, for right now, it isn't working for a lot of people. The wages are going down.
Well, absolutely. And notice,
and these people can't pay the loans back because they're not making any kind of money.
Well, one of the problems that I think is in America, we have a wrongful idea of what the purposes of education is. I think that the purpose of education is to make you a person more compassionate, empathetic, a person, when you say that term critical thinking, can look at Fox and say, I don't think so. Especially, and then you can look at MSNBC, which you mentioned before, and say, man, I'm not sure about that either. So I'm going to go out, and instead of identifying as MSNBC speaks only the truth, or Fox speaks only the truth, I'm going to figure out what the truth is. Now, why does that terrify the right more than the left? It terrifies the right because it denies them what they have to have. And what is that? It's not power, although that's part of it. In the church, it makes you question the very premise of the church, right? The church, or the system of religion, doesn't want that. In politics, it makes you question the ideas that are put forth as not necessarily the best ideas. So do I think it's like some cabal, where conservatives get together and put down education? No. I think what it is, but the power base, they realize that. And at the non-power base, because we don't explain what education is or the value of education is, they feel that when those of us who have an education, use the vocabulary that we know, that we're being, elitist or looking down on them. And Brian, you talked, and very rightfully, about economics in terms of where we value jobs. Now, if you could explain to me why, in the pandemic we just went through, why a movie star or an athlete is more important than a clerk or cashier that risked his or her life during a pandemic going to keep a store open where you can get groceries and maybe pharmacy drugs that you need or your family needs to survive. Well, there's a lot of theories why that's true, but I would suggest that that doesn't make them right. Just this week, we're going through, for football, any football fans out there, we're going through the draft. And for anybody who's not familiar with that, basically what happens in football, kids go to college, not to get a college education, but to play football, to win glory and bring money to their alma mater. Then pro teams look at how those players perform and then draft them to play on the professional level. And not all of them. People don't. I think that I don't even know, Brian. Do you know? I think the minimum salary now. I know it's under. I think it's like what, $650,000, which to the average person sounds. Oh my God, that's wonderful.
I think it's like 900,000. At least most sports.
You have
I think it's
players
around
making 35 and 40 million, right? So there's all kinds of inequality there. But are they really worth that kind of money? Well, in the capitalist society, they are, because I, with my grandson and son, we went to see a professional football game here in Washington with a team that wasn't commanding great prices at that time. So if they'd been winning it would have been a lot higher. And so to go to that game was roughly about $600 for a family of three. Now we went. I'm not questioning that they can charge whatever they want, and I can determine whether I go or not. And I did. But that's because of that kind of money, they can offer those kinds of contracts. Now, I love to eat, but I don't think in the past, I know in the past 20 years, I haven't spent $600 at McDonald's the whole time. So I'm kind of saying, wait a minute. If you really want them to have, shouldn't you spend more money at McDonald's? Well, under a capitalist system, the money doesn't go to the workers. Where does it go? It goes to the top, right, in terms of management, in terms of CEO, CFOs.
And that in itself is such a great inefficiency.
To the stockholders. So then people say, well, Dave, what are you talking about? I mean, you want communism? You want socialism? No, what I want to try to find out is a system that will work given that every human being is tremendously flawed. And that task may well be impossible. So then whatever system you have, whether it's communism, socialism, democracy, republic, whatever it is, you need to look at it and not do what conservative patriots want, my country, right or wrong, but my country, how can we make it better? And you don't hear that much, do you? Really? I mean, you don't. It's really, love it or leave it. What do you mean? What's wrong with it? Or what are you, some kind of something else? And somehow we've decided that a patriot is a person who just believes their country is perfect. And I don't call that I call anyone who believes their country is perfect, I call them a fool at best, and maybe worse than that. Do you have, Brian, unfair question, I haven't thought of that, but you brought us up on this economics. Do you have an economic system that you think is better than any other one And if it is, what one? I'm not saying you can't. That's not a challenge, but you teach business and you're involved with that. But then I carried a step further.
Yes, I have an economic system that'll work. It's not so much an economic system; it's a way of life, and that is, don't have too many children. Don't have any if you can't afford it.
Explain yourself. You look stupid right now. Explain yourself.
Well, if you look at the countries where they have a replacement rate below 2, you're talking Sweden, Norway, Finland, your smaller countries, you might argue that might have something to do with it, but the problem seems to be at its root population. The way that people will live better is through technology. It's technology. It hasn't been the system. People keep thinking that it was capitalism that made it work. It's the idea, at least in my opinion. It's things like the toilet, made cities possible, and it's the things that we can do with technology now that make our lives easier. That we have warm water when we want to take a shower, and it isn't a system, but I think that there has to be some efficiency. And that means it's a lot to do with population. Now, people like George Will would disagree with me and say that doesn't always work that way. But just from my perspective, I think that that's a really good start. The more human beings are dangerous, you know that. The more you have, the more problems you're going to have.
You know what? I'm listening to what you say, and there's much truth in what you're saying. So if there is, then someone who's anti-science is really far worse than just being anti-science, right? Or because it's like you're really, I don't know, what do we say, putting up a wall to stop the good part of advances in humanity. If that is indeed true, so we're right back again to what the conservatives, and I hate to say conservatives because they're not, what the right, I'm going to settle with that, what the right is doing is more heinous than we even know, or can even maybe comprehend.
Well, there's so much ignorance within the right, and Dave, you mentioned tonight. You said, well, both sides have done things, and I know you haven't equalized it, but if you go back to the what you're talking about with MSNBC, you have Fox, and you could argue that MSNBC still has to pay their sponsors and whatnot. But I've had this argument with others about this, and that people like Lawrence O'Donnell and Rachel Maddow, they don't have to choose their sponsors. They're effective, and they have people clawing to be a sponsor for their shows. But I think there's a certain level of professionalism compared to the Fox News. One really is propaganda. I know, because I know what I see in Russia.
No argument there.
And I know what I see in Fox, and there's a big difference. So when people say, well, both sides do it, that used to work like in the 1940s and 50s, when you talked about parties. But there really is no comparison, Dave. Whether you're talking about parties or you're talking about networks, there is no comparison.
Well, I would disagree on one point there. The idea behind politics, or should be if it isn't, is to make the life better for the citizens of that group which you are charged with taking care of. So in other words, a city council should be working to make their city better, and that would mean their residents, the county government, the state government, the federal government, right on up. Now, as someone who spent about 12 years, I guess, total active I'd love to tell you that the purpose of a news organization is to bring the news. It's not. It's to make money. And so you automatically have a group, say if politicians or those elected aren't doing their job, and then if the media's not doing its job, is one more important to clear up? And I would go with government would have to be first. Now, I'm not saying not hands off with media, but I think it's just naive in this day and age to think that any one news source, and by source, I'm also going to throw in print, radio, and television. They have very different purposes, and I will argue this with anyone.
From my perspective, it still comes down to the person who's moderating the show. You know, I mean, like, I trust certain people. Walter Cronkite, you could trust, but you could have said that CBS, you know, what was it, Paley was, you know, doing this or that. He didn't want to have Lost in Space on because it wasn't making enough money.
Do you think, and I haven't thought about this, so I'm just going to, okay. Do you think a Walter Cronkite type could exist today? And I'm going to say they couldn't.
Not in any large market, but because you can target to specific people now with cable TV, yes, there'll be, you know, there's right, like, for example,
and that's the,
can I give you an
the other
example?
thing, Brian?
You know, like Firing Line was a show that was popular. William F. Buckley, you could get the intellectual liberal and the intellectual conservative to watch that show. That could happen, but yet it wasn't a large audience. But they still had enough.
No. But I want to pick up on what you just said, because I think it's so important when we compare eras today. Basically, when I was born, 1952, until probably the late 60s, you know, past 64 anyway, you had three options on television: ABC, CBS, and NBC. And at that point, they were running 1/2 hour news shows in the evening. You did not have 24-hour cable. You did not have fragmented cable. I was reading an article this week that said there is too much good TV now, where great TV can't reach the number of people because it's spread out too much. And I think that's kind of the same thing with news. When you had the three networks.
But it's addressing the needs of a multicultural, multifaceted society. And instead of thinking that it's something bad, it's something good.
What is? I'm sorry.
The fact that you have split markets, I mean, that you have, you know, 1,000 channels. I mean, it does let the consumer enjoy what he or she wants to enjoy.
Then, okay, I'll follow up on what you said. Then why do we worry about Fox or OAN or Newsmax?
This is the dilemma. This is the dilemma. There are still some powerful networks that, you know, are influencers, and I would suggest that Fox is different than any of them. That you've mentioned yourself, the stupidity. Essentially, what you have is something of the Middle East. You know, in these theocratic countries, not all of them, but they're just, you know, blindly, you know, this is the way it is, and we're going to die for this kind of thing. And you saw that on January 6th. This is a special case. What's that, Dave?
What about, Brian, for sake of argument, this wasn't the argument you were making, but I want to bring this up. What about if America is too diverse now to be governed by one government. I think about that sometimes. For example,
well, in a certain sense, you do have that if you consider the local governments. That's the way it was done.
Yeah, but the feds can still have more of the state.
But there has to be some basic, fundamental view that people agree with, such as
there you are.
We should vote.
But
and even that is a problem now.
So, what do you do? What do I do? What do any of us do to encourage people to vote? Well, we don't really have that power, do we? We can say, please vote. We can say,
well, it certainly worked generally in the last election. The problem is that some people say there's too much voting going on. That's the problem.
You are. Look, the ground has been set, or the groundwork has been made. I don't think there'll be a presidential election, at least in the next 3, where there won't be a feeling on either side that the election results were real, right? So let's look again. Let me turn back to history a little bit.
Because Mike Lindell says so, or because Rudy Giuliani says so.
Well,
they come up with this thing.
Look,
statistically, it just sounds right. Statistically, it shouldn't have happened. That's enough right there. Statistically, it shouldn't have happened.
Look, I'm not going to sit here tonight and make a hero out of Richard Nixon, but I will say this: his finest moment as an American occurred the day after the presidential election in 1960. That election was so close that I agree with historians who think if the Illinois vote had been challenged,
right, and Gore did the same thing, so we're even.
And Nixon came forward and said, "The American people have spoken." We come to Donald Trump was acting as an individual president when he said, "I don't believe these results." But he has convinced.
He even said that before the election.
I know that, Brian, but it would be interesting to know how many more, or what percentage of the 74 million Americans who voted for Donald Trump believe that the election was stolen, not from Donald Trump, but from them. See, the thing about election is it's not stolen from the person, even if it is, it's stolen from you.
Right. And again, this is the propaganda of Fox News. Again, it's malicious. Right. It is propaganda. It's everything that Russia is.
Okay, so let me
and
ask
it
you
is
something.
different between, there is a difference between MSNBC and Fox.
I'm not arguing that. Here's the problem, though. What do you do short of shutting Fox down? And let's forget for a moment, we don't even know how to do that.
Well, it goes right to the beginning of our show when you said, I don't know if there's anything you can do right now.
Well, there you are, right?
I think that we're just going, I don't say give up, but it just, this is evolution, like Gary said. It's just evolution.
I'm sorry.
And it's evolution, and there's nothing, we're going to destroy each other just like 99.9% of the other ones. We're going to destroy each other. And you and I aren't going to see it because we're going to be dead before it happens. Although the way things are going with Ukraine, we don't know that for sure.
That brings me to a point I want.
And I mean that seriously.
Along those lines, I had a chance today, just through sheer blind luck, where I was, to be able to talk to someone who is an American, but well schooled in both cyber offense and cyber defense. One of those people that really can't tell you what they do because they would be breaking the codes that we live by. But you can talk in generalities. And he actually had spent the last 7 years working in the country of Georgia. an American who worked there, trying to help them bolster their cyber defenses against what they believed, and he concurred, was an imminent attack by Russia, a cyber attack on Georgia. Now, we didn't see that in the big picture. We saw instead a 20th century attack on a free independent state of Ukraine. Now, again, this expert today, he said, I'm just looking at what my field says and what I know. Now, he said about Putin, which I thought was interesting. And you look at what Putin's doing, he may be right. He said Putin doesn't want to restore the USSR, the bigness of it, but he wants to go back to like a Russia that has Ukraine and Georgia and some of these other areas that were, part of Russia at one point. And he said that he believes that with every Ukrainian moment of victory, that the possibility of Russian cyber attacks gets greater. Now, again, we have to point out that this is his area. So what I mean is, obviously, you're kind of
Right, it's going to come. It's
more
just a question of time.
More than nuclear. Now, right now, if you were to poll most of the American people, and I think it's understandable, they're more concerned about a nuclear attack than a cyber attack, because we've seen nuclear, the effects of Hiroshima, Nagasaki,
Chernobyl.
We really haven't seen an all-out cyber attack yet. Do you know which one might prove to be more deadly? I think a cyber attack, short of causing nuclear winter and unbalance. I mean, yes, of course, that's still there. I don't think people really understand what a cyber attack would do. Do you realize it brings the United States, if it's done well, to a complete halt?
I would imagine, but I assume
you realize
that the government has been planning for this, Dave. I mean, I'm not saying they can't.
Did they plan for COVID, Brian?
Well, they would have, except that Trump got. No, they did. It was Obama had a serious program set for something like COVID, but your buddy Trump decided that wasn't important only because Obama did it, and it wasn't necessary because Obama.
You don't think Trump undid things along the cybersecurity line?
I would agree with you.
Yeah. See, so what I'm saying, I mean, I'm not saying
I would agree with you.
Look,
so Biden has to catch up on everything. He's got to catch up on Ukraine with the deliveries of weapons. He's got to catch up with all because Schmucko did this. And meanwhile, you've got
another.
While this is happening
today
on Hannity, you've got them talking about Hunter Biden's laptop. I'm goddamn sick of it. Get the goddamn laptop already, Sean.
Well, the question becomes:
talk about a laptop, and they found nothing.
Hunter Biden was an addict. That's no secret.
That's no secret.
And addicts do very strange and almost incomprehensible things. Also, the sons and daughters, more the sons, but daughters too, of powerful people have a tendency maybe to either abuse their family's privilege or to use it to their advantage. Now, I think anyone's pretty naive that a company that went after Hunter Biden wasn't also interested in the power that the Biden name brings, right? I mean, so I think sometimes, come on, look at, if you really want to go after somebody, let's look at the Trump kids, okay? I don't know that Hunter Biden could have done anything in any manner equal to what the Trump trio has done of Donald's oldest three children. But you're back to your point. Hannity's not going to point that out. Tucker's not going to point out. But you know the real evil person is and all that? Rupert Murdoch.
Right.
Murdoch could
He's
change
not even
that
American.
tomorrow. Murdoch could change. He is Fox News. Look,
Prophets.
Roger Ailes was Fox News. They got rid of it, and it still marches on. And there's just too much money to be made in Fox News right now for old man Murdoch to say, and he may believe in some of this stuff. And, there are people who don't want to be president, but want to make presidents. I think Hannity's part of that. I think Murdoch is part of that. I think Tucker wants to be president or something and is actually using that as a platform. It would not surprise me if America doesn't change, that we do see Tucker in politics, not at a level he should start at, but at a much higher, level. It's not good, Brian. I know I'm kind of echoing what you've been saying for the 150 shows or whatever we've done. But I don't know how a thinking person can look at this and say tonight two things. A, you pick where you are on the continuum from concern to abject terror. But I don't see how you could be on the things will work out, or this is really great what's happening now. But I also am open to any ideas to make it better that you or me or any individual can do right now.
Well,
I don't
COVID for a while made us do something. Maybe, Lake Powell will make 5 states do something.
I hope you're right. I hope you're right.
I don't want to have Lake Powell do something. I worry about the animals more than anything. I don't give a shit about the human beings for the most part.
I understand,
especially if they're Republican.
But I'm taking.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm not a humanitarian when it comes to that shit.
I've
had it with
them. I'm not arguing with on that. My point is, I'm not sure that those who are already do not believe in climate crisis, do not believe that we are headed in completely wrong direction with the possibility of wiping out, if not all life on Earth.
They have to have the tsunami hit them to believe it. It goes
my friend.
Now it's quick, but it's too slowly in terms of human terms for them to comprehend it.
Did you watch? And I know I'm going to break my own rule here but I think it was just a moment that reflected. Did you watch that series of interviews from South Dakota during the height of the pandemic as people in the hospital dying of either the virus itself or complications, deny that they have it? When you don't believe anything, or you believe that everything is a conspiracy, what's going to make you, if that doesn't, and I know, I'm sure there are people who said, oh my God, we heard those stories, oh my God, I should have gotten. Well, you didn't. So my point tonight is, or to get to kind of, I guess if there was a theme of the show, is we, meaning those who do not think America's on a good road, we have to try to figure out some way to either halt the decline. If we can't get back on the right road, at least to give us space to think about what to do. And I hate to sound like a broken record, but I fear tonight much more Ron DeSantis than I do Donald Trump.
Oh, yeah, tonight. Ronnie feels that way too. She's frightened of DeSantis because he is smarter than
you
Trump.
Look at what he did today. You look at what he did today, or I guess yesterday actually, because today's Saturday. He's now pushing. He has the "Don't Say Gay" bill. He has the new election police. Man, we're getting awfully close to authoritarianism and fascism in 1984 in the state of Florida. But now he is going to push for complete open carry with no permit in the state of Florida. And this is a state that has the most deadly school shooting in American history. This is a state that had the largest massacre of gay men and women at the Pulse nightclub. And somehow the governor of this state thinks it would help his state to have more people carry weapons. But he's not concerned about Florida. He's willing to risk Florida and send it under. He's running for national office, and the office he's running for is president of the United States. And I think DeSantis is not a stupid man. The jury's still out on Donald Trump. And if he's not stupid, he's so narcissistic that he's not in the pale of normal human interaction. So DeSantis, for some reason, thinks that that's the road to the presidency. And he's going to take it until he's dropped. And now we bring it back to what you said tonight. Right now, he is the anointed candidate of Fox News. It's a hell of a lot of power, Brian.
Yeah.
With your network, and I'm joking, but Fox has a hell of a lot of power. MSNBC actually rose and overtook them, and Trump was
right. And don't forget, and MSNBC generally has to split their market with CNN.
I'm not arguing that, right? But what I'm saying is, Trump also, or the Trumpian regime, he didn't single-handedly do it, but has made the New York Times circulation explode. Washington Post is up. But Trump's not in power now. And I think every day, I think he does get a little bit weaker,
Well, once he gets the Twitter account back, I don't know.
Pardon me?
Once he gets his Twitter account back, he will get that back.
Do you really? See, I don't know.
I just think Elon Musk is going to do the same thing that Murdoch did, and essentially, I know he's like half American, half Canadian, or whatever that, but he's from South Africa. He really probably had no real allegiance to the United States, although he's making most of his money here. He'll do what he wants to make money. That seems to be the underlying, characteristic of these people. It's never enough.
Here. It's the actual quote that everybody misquotes is not the money is the root of all evil. It's the love of money is the root of all evil. And I would throw another, the love of money more than your love of humanity is the root of all evil. And money in and of itself is no different than anything else. It's not good or evil. It's how you use it. A gun, the Bible, it doesn't matter. It's not the thing that is good or bad. It's how it's used.
Dave, what do you think? Joey's asking you if DeSantis is worse than Trump.
Yes, very simply in my mind. And I would not put down anyone who argues the other way. And I always try to think of it. But I'm going to try to say why I think that. Like I said, I think Donald Trump has the seeds of his own destruction sown into his own DNA, right? He has no loyalty, and in the end, that does count for something. DeSantis will do somewhat what Youngkin did here. Youngkin was able to portray himself as something that wasn't Donald Trump, was able somehow to keep Trump a little bit out of Virginia, But what did he do on his first day? He went full Trump, and it's been full Trump since then in terms of things that he would do, because he knows that that's how you solidify the base of the Republican Party. And a little play on words here. The base of the Republican Party right now is indeed base meaning lowest form. So that's one reason. Secondly, I mentioned earlier, I think Ron DeSantis is much smarter than Donald Trump. And maybe I'm overrating intelligence, but I'll always take the intelligent person as more dangerous than the stupid person in high-level politics. I'm not talking about on the street when one has a gun or whatever. I'm not talking about that. So let me ask you. So I'm going to go on record as saying yes. I personally fear because also DeSantis doesn't really have an established track record. He does in Florida, but he could always kind of say, well, and I know a lot of people are thinking about, oh yeah, but he took on Disney and that's gonna run afoul. No. I think that was a smart move, what he did. I really do. And I'm not going to go in great length, but if anybody wants me to expand or expound on that belief, I do.
Dave, if you don't mind, I want to. Okay, finish your thought.
No, I'm just going to say the last thing to answer that question is this. Part of Donald Trump's ability to win was the fact that he had no record to run on or against. I mean, his was a complete clean slate politically. Now, DeSantis won't have that, but he's going to run against the Biden record. I think it's wrong. I think Americans are naive at best or whatever. Joe Biden's ratings now are an indication no president has ever been reelected with numbers this low now. Now, it's a long way till the election. DeSantis won't have to run on his record of governing in Florida. That's already been. He'll run against the Democratic record, whether that is Biden, whether it is the current vice president, whether it is whomever the Democrats run, because a very effective campaign message is gas is high. The president is Joe Biden. You can't buy the president, and American people don't sit down and parse. Well, this is happening and this is happening. Or they don't say, well, the president gets blamed for things he shouldn't get blamed for, or hopefully someday he or she. They also get credit for things he or she doesn't. And so I believe DeSantis is a much better campaigner than Trump. And you look at the current crowds of Trump, Brian, they're not as large. They're not as interested. They're looking for the next circus. And that circus may well be provided by Ron DeSantis.
Dave, I wanted to take us out with a video from a guy named Johnny FD. He is an American who's been on Bald and Bankrupt's channel, who's a very popular channel, almost 4 million subscribers. And Johnny's become famous in his own right because he left Ukraine with Bald and he came back. Real nice guy. And he was going through a town. What town was that? Hostomel. It's south and east of Kiev. And he's a guy who's always very polite, and very straightforward, and very unemotional. But this was a case where he got emotional. This was his video from today. And he went to just a regular village, and he saw all the destruction that the Russians have. And don't forget, he had been in Russia so many times with his buddy. So for him to have this reaction, he was calling the motherfucker this, the motherfucker that, and the guy never curses, but it's just bad. So anyway, I'm going to put this on. We may come back or not, I don't know, but let's just listen to.
Okay.
He doesn't know that he's going to cry. He's just talking about this woman. He tried to give her money and she wouldn't accept it. And then he just, he started breaking down. And luckily he met some other ones there and then he kind of got out of it. But we'll check it out here. Let me take the sound effects off and go back just a little bit.
They used a lot of this similar, a lot of the same tanks, a lot of the things from back in the day. So I don't know if there's a way to easily identify this. But either way, you can see the devastation. I mean, if Russia never came, I mean, at the end of the day, like, no matter what anyone ever says, if Russia didn't come in with their tanks and their soldiers, none of this would happen. That's like the only argument you ever need to make. Don't ever give you some bullshit about the other side. I've seen it now firsthand, my own eyes. I met the people. I've been literally like that grandma was crying. Like when I hugged, like I tried to give her money, and she wouldn't take it because she was like, "I don't need money. I just swore to stop." And like she was really like she was appreciative of me trying to give her money, but she was like, "I'm lucky. I'm okay financially. Like she probably." I mean, she probably, came from like a good, family with good jobs. Luckily, she has some savings, but her house is gone. And, like I've seen these photos, I've seen these videos. I've been watching the news, right? Being here in person and seeing this shit and meeting the people, it's like it becomes just more real. Like, there's a very fucking family that was living here. I don't think I've ever, I've been making videos on YouTube for more than 10 years. I don't think I've ever cried once. But it's fucking war, man. Fucking war. Look at this. Everywhere I look. This whole town. And I don't know if I've ever even heard this town mentioned on the news. And it's not the media's fault, right? It's that there's so many villages, so many towns like this. They're fucking destroyed by fucking Russian troops. And it just fucking sucks. This war needs to fucking end. This guy's still living in there. He's still living in his house. Fucking shit. Look at this. There's like kids' playthings here. There's kids that are living here. Fucking izvinite. Ti doma, da? Ti doma?
Your house.
Fuck.
Machine. Auto more. My auto.
And your car. His car.
My auto. Wow. Under there.
Fuck. Bien. Mazda. Oh. Bomb.
Well, we could go on forever with this. It's David. Let me just put this off a loop back. But this was an emotional response from a guy who's decent. Like I say, he got out of town when the Russians invaded with Bald. Bald never went back. Bald went to Syria. And Bald kind of is sympathetic with Russia in a lot of things, but not the war now, I guess. But he's laid off of it. And Johnny went back. And it really hurt because he said, this could have been my home or anybody's home. Imagine your home with, bullet holes in the bathroom. And then,
the question,
it's inexcusable.
I agree. But here would be my one question. If Vladimir Putin were removed from the picture, would the war continue? Now, that's not a rhetorical question. It's an actual question I would ask.
Well, I think
if indeed that's true, could
the vacuum, if the vacuum was filled by Navalny, yes, it could. If all of a sudden they came out, if there was a resurgence of the progressive part of Russia, if there were a resurgence after removing him, things can happen quickly there.
Oh no, I'm not arguing
But
that.
I mean, if you're thinking about, well, will somebody else come up? That's possible too. I'm not here to deny
No.
that.
I think at this point, Vladimir Putin deserves to die. I'm willing to be judge and jury on that. If indeed I was in a position to take Vladimir Putin's life, I would, and not really have any qualms about it, and not worry about who fills that vacuum, because I don't see anything good coming as long as Vladimir Putin is in charge of Russia. Now we're back to how do you remove him? Man.
Well, you first of all, again, there's still that problem of propaganda there, and that's part of the problem. If you're looking for a vacuum to be filled, you've got to open up that press. And right now, it's so powerful. And again, this thing has not changed in years. I mean, I'm talking 800 years.
Mm-hmm.
This authoritarian society that they have. I don't know. I don't know, Dave. And this is where we say it can happen. And they have some support here. There's this group of Republicans who still support this idea because they know they're going to be doing the same thing eventually to us.
Then
given the chance.
Then is Gary Peacock tonight get the award for not throwing up his hands? I don't think that's what he was doing. When you talk about a evolution, that is a fight you cannot win, right?
Right, because it's intrinsically a fight within itself.
Right. So that doesn't mean, to me at least, doesn't mean you continue to do what you can. What I think it does is refocus your thinking about outcomes. And what you have to think is, what might I do to live with myself, rather than what can I do to help a victory? And that's maybe where we are right now, Brian. Pessimistic, optimistic, realistic, all those words don't mean anything. It may just mean that we have to decide, each of us individually, what is it that we must do, because it's what we are convinced is morally right.
And what makes it worse, like what Trev is saying here, I mean,
win.
There are a lot of people who say send in troops. But, again, it's the question, can it get worse? And the suggestion is that, yes, it can get worse.
Well, again, if troops could go in and eliminate Vladimir Putin, do you really? I mean, there's no guarantee that's going to happen, right?
Yeah. Now, Sandy, you have it right. We don't have the time to really speak. I think we intended on speaking. Well, we intended on Kevin being here. I don't know what happened to Kevin, because I know he quit his job. Kevin has had some health issues.
Well, you're kind to Sandy. I'm going to take a little different tactic, and I respect her. I don't know what else we can do right now. I mean, that sounds like I'm throwing up my hands, but I am. I mean,
I think everything that has needed to be done generally has been done.
I mean, this is not a good time. I mean, and to say to hell with it. I am personally frustrated. I don't like to just point out things that are wrong. But right now, it's the best I can do, because I don't have solutions that are practical.
And by the way, Putin doesn't really care about losing, 20,000 soldiers. All he considers is how many people, can I humiliate and destroy, and I'll count those numbers up.
Mindset.
44 million
and for those who advocate
versus 20,000.
And looking at the video you showed tonight, it's hard not to say we need to go in and save, if nothing else, the children of the Ukraine. You also have to know your enemy. And Putin has a hell of a lot of people he'll sacrifice more than America will.
Well, he did it
Right?
with COVID because he was late, and the older people, a lot of people died in Russia, and that was his fault basically. He didn't seem to give a shit about it.
And I
It was
think
too
the
late.
other thing to consider is it would be much better if we were united in our view, not only of who the evil one is in this, but how that evil one should be eradicated.
Well, you have
And we're
Madison
far from
Cawthorn who
that.
calls Zelensky the evil one.
I just said that. I'm agreeing with you. So I guess tonight, if you have to give a title to this show, is we're fucked collectively right now. But individually, we have to do what we can do. I don't know what, whether it's talk on this show or go out and talk to people or vote or encourage people to vote or
You
find
can't, like you said, you
organizations that
can't give up.
we believe in.
You can't, and that's what Navalny said. If anybody gets a chance to watch the CNN Plus special, that was good. He said, if I should die, just tell them, never ever give up. And if people like that are willing to fight, the people who go to the Ambassador Bridge or not the Ambassador Bridge in Alabama. Anyway, the point is that
The Selma
Bridge. You owe it to them. They stuck out there next to you, and if you have to go down, and I have to go down, that's it. Because you can't turn your back from it. That's not what Jesus would do. But you don't even have to have Jesus to tell you.
No, it's about.
If you have to have Jesus tell you this is wrong, or open a book to figure that out, then you do need Jesus. This is pretty easy to figure out.
The real Jesus that doesn't exist, but mythically could exist in that book. So again, maybe next week we'll have a better handle on what can be done. Right now,
hey, the way things are going, Dave, I mean, we can't guarantee we'll be alive next week.
I understand that.
That's a distinct possibility. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, to end this way, but that's the way it is.
I'm going to be honest with you. I think the destruction of what is currently the Republican Party will have to come from that party. I don't think liberals are going to be able to destroy the Republican Party. What we can do,
the Republican Party has to destroy the Republican Party.
We can help them destroy themselves. I don't know how exactly we do that.
Dave, I'm going to have to shut down if you don't mind.
I agree.
I'm getting to the point I'm going to fall asleep.
We're over our time.
But thank you, Dave. I expected Kevin.
Thank you.
Whatever Kevin, he had to have a reason. Next time we'll catch Kevin. All right, Dave. Take care of yourself. I appreciate it very much. Thank you, everybody.
The same, Brennan. Thanks to everyone who watched this show. Where tonight we expose problems with no solutions, but
sometimes there aren't.
For them, they may be out there.
All right, folks. Have a wonderful week if you can. If not, just be yourself.